Why, hello, ladies and gentlemen. And on today's show, we are talking about the Miami Marlins, but specifically about the Miami Marlins rotation because everybody's talking about how they might trade some of their pitchers. All of them are on the block, allegedly. And even more specifically, we're going to be talking with my old buddy, Aram Leighton, Miami Marlins super fan, sometimes, among other things. We're going to get into it, guys. You know what you're listening to. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For today, January 13th, Friday the 13th. Crazy. I know. It's freaky, but don't worry. Nothing cursed on today's podcast, hopefully. I am your host with sometimes occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. Find me on Twitter at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, or at LO_Padres if you get tired of my non-Padres comic book video game, whatever tweets. You can check out on there. And also check out on the YouTube if you want to see, in my opinion, some incredible visuals for today's episode. You got the Tatis bobblehead, which everyone can check out. Link in the podcast description if you want them. And then we've also got me rocking my City Connect Eric Hosmer shirt, which was gifted to me by, at least partially by, one of my guests today. All right. He was part of the gift. And he is also, and this is my favorite part about having him on, he is also the co-founder of JustBaseball.com, and also the host of The Call Up, which is an MLB prospects podcast, and also a co-host of the Just Baseball show. He's a writer. He's Mr. Baseball. He's been on the show before. And he's a Marlins guy. Mr. Aram Leighton, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm excited to be on because honestly, I'm a little bit tired of the whole Marlins pitching trade talk thing. It's been going on since last deadline at this point. And, I think it's clear that they're going to make a deal at some point. Mm-hmm. I know that we've seen the Marlins and the Padres tied together in conversations and have been, linked together. But man, I really like the Padres and the Marlins as a match. So I'm excited to kind of workshop it, talk a little trade with you, and talk about the Padres, because I think they're obviously a very, very fun team going into next year, but could definitely use one more arm. I think there's no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm. And I think for the Padres right now, it's been more of a question about what kind of quality arm. Are they going to go for a more established guy, or like what we saw last week where they signed Brett Honeywell and they signed Adam Engel? Like, are they just trying to bolster their depth a little bit to just have guys that you could kind of throw out there because they feel great about their top three in Darvish, Musgrove, and Snell? That remains to be seen, but it is true. The Marlins, they have been in the news lately for a bunch of different things, but mainly what we're going to talk about today is the pitching, because the Marlins, for what feels like a long time now, have been just in a offensive limbo. That's actually putting it lightly. They have not had a lot of offense, but what they have succeeded in doing is creating a lot of great pitching. They have Sandy Alcantara. They've got Edward Cabrera. They've got Max Meyer, who's on the shelf right now. They've got Jesus Luzardo, and they've got Pablo Lopez. They've got all sorts of names that are on the trade market, at least allegedly and theoretically, right? And the Padres are one of those teams because of Nick Martinez and Seth Lugo being, in theory, they're 4 and 5 starters. I say in theory because they're a little bit more reliever. They're more akin to being relievers than starting pitchers. So obviously the Padres are attached to the Marlins. I prefer, like you, also to talk about this, because if I have to hear the name, he's close. This may be the first ever non-Padre to get the name ban here on this podcast. I'm not going to say his name. He is an outfielder for the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Yeah.
I'm just, oh my God. This guy is Mickey Mantle, according to Pirates fans.
For transparency, man, in our staff chat at Just Baseball, which you're a part of, obviously, we had to just put the kibosh on Brian Blank conversation because it's just at the point now where it's going to happen eventually, and we're going to go through the same rut of Pirates want this, and everybody else doesn't want to give that up because it's not reasonable. But the Pirates also don't want to offer him more than $75 million. So it's like this. It's just I just need that to end, and it's not as bad as that with the Marlins situation, because I think the Marlins situation is more complex, right? Kim Ng is trying to plug plug some sort of life into this offense. Like you mentioned, the pitching is good, and there's more help on the way in the form of Yuri Perez, arguably the best pitching prospect in baseball, undoubtedly top 3. You talk about Max Meyer, who's on the shelf, but he'll be back in a year and is another top flight kind of guy. They've got a few other guys in their system, and they've got a few other arms that impressed last year that don't even have guaranteed spots in the rotation, like a Braxton Garrett. So for Kim Ng, it's different. It's like, okay, which arm do I trade? And I can only really trade one of them, because even the deepest teams pitching wise, you trade a couple arms, all of a sudden one injury, you're not deep anymore. So Kim's trying to survey the market here. And that's why we've heard about a few different teams that, could be tied to the Fish. The reason why I think the Padres make a lot of sense is the Marlins don't want prospects. And that's something that I've heard from the team itself. I've heard that from, Craig Mish, who's the most sourced guy when it comes to the Marlins. Like, they don't want prospects. They want big leaguers, because Kim Ng, is trying to prove that she's worthy of an extension as the Marlins general manager. And so far, it's hard to say that she's proved anything. I think she's been dealt a tough hand, but she needs to show a better product on the field next year. And if you go get a prospect, like let's say a Jackson Merrill, just for hypothetical, that doesn't help Kim Ng next year. That doesn't help Kim Ng keep her job. So, the Marlins need big league pieces, and we're seeing potentially Ha-Seong Kim being dangled. I want to hear from you on that, because that's a guy that I think is severely underrated, even by Padres fans to a degree.
Yes.
Maybe I don't think people really appreciate how good Ha-Seong Kim is, and I think with the Marlins now trading Miguel Rojas, it seems like an unbelievable fit to work a deal around Ha-Seong Kim and one of the Marlins pitchers. And it could be Pablo, it could be Luzardo, it could be some of these other guys. And interested to talk to you about that too, because Pablo, even with the lease control, has more control than almost every other guy in this rotation, right? Because most of these guys are on their way to free agency besides Musgrove, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. And then Martinez, because he just signed the contract. But
yeah,
Snell, Darvish, they're off the books. And with the Padres' lack of really like dynamite kind of pitching prospects in their farm system, in fairness, the lack of anything in the farm system, which is fine, because you got all of these great players. You got Juan Soto, who is allegedly the type of package that the Pirates want for their guy, which is like, it has the same energy of like Ron Rivera not knowing that his team was about to be eliminated from the postseason, is the Pirates being like, we want to watch Soto back.
He requested a trade.
It's
like
insane.
You lose some leverage there, buddy. Like, that's how it works.
It's absolutely insane. But with the Marlins, like you're saying, it just seems a lot more realistic, because the Padres don't have necessarily farm talent to offer. They have major league talent to offer. And yeah, I agree. I think that with the Kim Ng thing, it feels like they got to stop kicking the can down the road. At some point, you have to be like, all right, you have texted me before about Jorge Alfaro being in left field at some points, and I really thought you were kidding. I was like, that's funny. That's a good joke. And then I looked at the line and I was like, oh my God. So the Marlins outfield, am I crazy for thinking that like the best outfield I could think of that they've had is like Corey Dickerson? Was he good for you guys? I can't even
He
remember.
was not great for them, but he was serviceable.
Yeah.
If you look since Yelich and since those guys, and Stanton and Ozuna, it's kind of been a revolving door, man. And there was one year when I was hosting Locked On Marlins where I was keeping a running tab of how many different players started in the outfield. And I think by the end of the year, we got to 17 or 18 different starting outfielders. It was just a carousel. So, now they've got Soler, they've got Avi Garcia, who both were disappointing, but at least you can pencil those guys in, right? So they need a center fielder. And this is where it's interesting too. They need a shortstop, they need a center fielder. And they just need guys who can hit, period. I feel like the Padres can't really trade Grisham, right? Because I'm looking at this outfield situation and I'm like, okay, you've got Matt Carpenter presumably playing left. Is that what the plan is? But until Tatis comes back?
We don't know exactly what the plan is, exactly with the Padres right now with their outfield situation. But you do bring up the shortstop and stuff, and we're going to talk about that. But first, before we talk about the exact trades, and I want to talk to you about Pablo Lopez specifically, since he seems to be the most popular one on market and whatnot. Let me talk to you guys really quickly about Built Bar. It's fantastic. Just like all of these players we've been talking about, with the exception of that Pittsburgh Pirates one. All right. These just talking trades and being happy about baseball. You know what else makes me happy? Built Bars, because they're full of protein. They don't have nearly as many calories as your other candy bars and your Snickers bars, your payday bars, and they're super tasty. I know you've had them before. I've had them a whole bunch. They've got churro flavors. They've got peanut butter brownie. They've got coconut almond. They've got cherry barcia, which is my personal favorite. It's awesome. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box. That's right. You can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. It's pretty sick. So go check that out, guys. You can pick up a 4-pack of cookies and cream, whatever you want. And if you're into the Sam's Club thing, and run and grab a 13 bar box with all sort of hit flavors that you can get, guys. So go check out Built Bar at built.com. Trust me, I've been talking about this forever, and they're still good forever to infinity and beyond. Shout out the Built Bars. Um, Again, remind everyone, go check out also Aram on Twitter. He's at Aram Leighton 8. Forgot to say that at the beginning of the show. And same thing with all the Just Baseball stuff. Now we got to talk about specifics. We glossed over it at the beginning. We touched on it, but it really is, and this isn't like a Yankees fan trade machine thing. We'll give you Andujar and Clint Frazier, and then we want Jazz Chisholm, right? In fact, like you said, with just kind of the Marlins seem like they're just searching for someone who's at least capable. And the Padres are like, cool, we don't want to give up our stars, because no team ever does, but they certainly have guys who are just startable and can work. And I think that the two examples of that are Ha-Seong Kim, two positions that make a lot of sense for the Marlins. And with Trent Grisham, yeah, he can't really hit. His arbitration just got settled. He's beginning making around $3 million this year, but he can play really great defense. And I know that the Marlins have missed out on this. And then Ha-Seong Kim got better with the bat as time went along. And you hit the nail around the button. I don't know what's going on with it. Could just be Twitter microcosm speaking, right? It could be. I don't know what it is with people being like, oh, well, basically he had a higher WAR than Trey Turner, so clearly WAR doesn't matter, and all these things. And I don't know where this stuff is coming from. He's such a foundational, smart, great, like, just a depth piece. Not everybody on your team needs to be Tatis. And by the way, with the goober who I have the bobblehead of, who knows how healthy he's going to stay. You know what feels really great? Having a backup shortstop at the minimum, and is getting better offensively. So I think that'd be pretty appealing for the Marlins. What do you think?
I mean, dude, he was 26 last year, right? Like, I think we forget too that he's young, coming over from, overseas, which is it's a big adjustment. He has his second season to really do that, and first season was rough offensively. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And to see the way he built off of that, and was able to put together a 105 WRC plus last year. So not only is he one of the better defenders at shortstop, he was above average offensively. Second half, he was even better. I think he could be a 110, 115 WRC plus guy, which is 10 to 15% above average. You do that while playing great defense, you're a really solid shortstop. He was nearly a 4-win player last year. So, do the Padres need him? Not really. You're moving a glove first shortstop to second because of how loaded your infield is. Okay, that's a nice problem to have. Well, you don't really need to have him at second base, playing the best second base in the world. I guess he'll probably be up there. Him and Nico Horner, I think, will be competing for the Gold Glove at second base. But it's kind of a waste when, he could be playing a really good shortstop somewhere, and the team will value him as a very good defensive shortstop. How would things align? Would you put Crone back at second? Would Jake Cronenworth go back to second if you move to Ha-Seong Kim? Then who plays first? Carpenter? Like, that's where I get confused. Is like, we hear about these trade talks, but I don't even know how things kind of settle back in with the Padres if they do move one of these guys.
Yeah, and the big thing is Tatis, because until he comes back, there's definitely going to be questions about who's playing where. I doubt that Tatis would play first base, but he can it makes sense to kind of try him out anywhere, right? You have the shortstop thing, and then you could have him in the outfield. He's just so athletic and talented that I'm sure it's at least worth trying him out there. So maybe he's the starting left fielder once he gets back, right? And then you have Grisham, and then you have Soto. Or if they were to trade Trent Grisham, I'm still a little bit of a proponent. I'm still a little bit of a believer in Jose Azocar. The reason I think that is because I think he's fast. I think he has good reaction time. I think he can basically just be Grisham, but without the power, but every now and then just get you some base hits. A 260, 320 on base type of guy who doesn't hit for power. I'm not saying that this guy's an all-star, but I just think we haven't seen enough from him in the outfield, and he could be at least a really good defensive player. So that is what I
Yeah,
think makes
that's
Grisham a
interesting
little
too.
bit expendable.
Five outs above average last year and limited sample size in center field
Exactly.
is pretty impressive. 7 outs above average overall. Like that's almost, you could almost replace Grisham then with that,
Mm-hmm.
and he might hit better. So, and he's cheaper. So I think that's a great point there. And I know Marlins fans wouldn't be thrilled with, oh, now we got Trent Grisham in center, but you're a pitching and defense oriented team. You now pick up 2 elite defenders, and let's be real, Ha-Seong Kim's a big upgrade. He'd still be one of their better hitters, which is crazy to say.
I
And
know.
Trent Grisham, he might not be the best hitter, but even his capabilities, I think, are better than some of the guys that they were rolling out there at points last year. So I would take the elite defense up the middle between shortstop and center with those 2. And if you think that the Padres feel the same way, that they could plug a Zokar in there, I really do believe that Tatis will settle into left. I think that makes the most sense because they were talking about that before all of this, anyways, right? I mean, we were hearing that conversation when he was just trying to stay healthy. So I think now where it's a combination of, yes, still want him to stay healthy, and also like, sorry, buddy, while you were busy riding motorcycles and taking steroids, we signed Xander Bogaerts to play shortstop. So, it's just the reality of it. You lose that ability to say, hey, that's my spot. And, I feel like left field is more, he'll be more than fine out there with his speed and his arm. I think he'll figure that out. So if that's how the Padres are approaching it, if you can turn Ha-Seong Kim and Trent Grisham, who, if I'm not mistaken, how many more years of control does Grisham have? 1? Or
I'm gonna say 1. Yeah, it feels like it's been an eternity that he's been on this team. I don't know why.
he's a free agent in 2026. So
2026. Okay,
but if you can turn those 2 guys into, arguably, I mean, this is a good rotation. Pablo Lopez gives you just another. If Pablo Lopez is your 4,
yeah,
that's a World Series rotation, or at least one of the better rotations in the National League. And now you have a lot less pressure on the 2 guys trying to make the full transition from the bullpen. Nick Martinez, Seth Lugo, right? Both those guys are trying to make a transition from the bullpen. That's a lot. And then on top of that, Blake Snell or Yu Darvish, if they get hurt, who are you plugging in? And this is a very feasible scenario, not even to be a doomsday guy, but like, let's say one of the 3, the big 3, hits the IL for a small period of time even, and one of Nick Martinez and Seth Lugo is struggling a little bit. You got 2 open spots in the rotation. That's not that unlikely. Who are you plugging in there? Julio Teheran? Jay Groom?
Hey, Julio Teheran was great in like 2014.
Yeah. So like, I really think this is a move that I would way rather have more pitching depth if I'm the Padres, given what they have talent-wise in the lineup, than have infield depth in the form of a Ha-Seong Kim. Especially because they've got guys like Eggy Rosario coming up, a prospect I really like, who I think could come up and, he's not going to be a superstar, but he puts bat on ball and he can play a lot of positions. And that's another guy that can fill in and hold it down.
Yeah. And I think that my thing, I've always been about acquiring depth. I just think this team has so many superstars that it's okay to have some depth. So they're not in like that. This has been one of my random pet peeves for a while, aside from the Pittsburgh outfielder. One of my pet peeves has been how everyone always says how their team desperately needs pitching, which I think is just a factor of how baseball works. You can't get enough pitching, right? But
yeah, you never have enough.
I don't think the Padres are in like DEFCON 4, but they're definitely in a scenario because of what you outlined. And I talked about this on a previous show where they were very, very secretly incredibly good with their health last year. Obviously, you had the Tatis thing. I know. And Snell and Clevenger out of the gate. But aside from that, Musgrove, Darvish, right? Like all these guys, Nick Martinez stays healthy. Jake Cronenworth stays healthy. Although I've heard behind the scenes that he might have played a little bit hurt, but he was playing, right? Manny Machado, always healthy. I mean, it's ridiculous with this guy, but he doesn't outrun a ground ball sometimes. Whatever, right? The Padres were really healthy last year. And I think that you might expect, like you said, Darvish, he's not getting any younger. Um, Blake Snell, he's had an issue with staying healthy. So I think it makes a lot of sense. My question is, you know, this isn't like an accusatory question. Is Pablo Lopez really good? And I don't think that this is Michael Waka, who is a free agent of mine that I find to be just everyone's freaking out because there's no pitchers left and they're like, "Oh yeah, Michael Waka, the guy who's had one good season." like
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the case. Is Pablo Lopez like really that type of starter in a vacuum? I know that for the Padres as a 4, that would be absolutely phenomenal, but in a vacuum,
No.
do you like him as a pitcher?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, yes, I do like him as a pitcher, but I think it's a fair question because Pablo Lopez is consistent, and I think that's something that is hard to do in today's game. And his numbers were inflated by a bad final stretch. He
Mhm.
was floated in trade talks, and basically up till the final minute wasn't sure if he was going to get traded or not. And I think that took a little bit of a toll on him. His first couple starts off of the deadline were bad, and then he
Mhm.
finished strong again at the end. I think, you got to know what you're getting here. And at the same time, he's 27. So he's young. Like, I don't think people
Mhm.
realize how young Pablo Lopez is. And he's continuing to learn the craft and get better. He's a really smart guy that when he's done playing wants to be a doctor. So he's a guy that's always trying to get better in terms of pitch usage, pitch shape, all of those things. So I think he's we might not have seen the ceiling yet, but I think if you're expecting him to be a frontline guy, it's just not the case. He's a really solid middle of the rotation starter with 2 years of control that rarely is going to have that blow up outing. Is he going to go 8 innings of 12 Ks? Probably not. Musgrove has that in him. Snell has that in him. Darvish has it in him. That's why those 3 guys are considered frontline talents, but you're going to get a lot of 6 innings, 3 runs. At
Mhm.
the worst, it's like 5 innings, 3 runs, and you're always in the ball game. And I think when you're a team like the Padres, you need a guy like that. And the other thing I look at is you got 2 years of control here with Lopez. That the Padres, they got to pay Juan Soto. We assume they're probably not going to pay Machado. That money's probably going to go to Soto as Machado, I think, opts out, after this year, and they probably can't pay him. They're not going to be able to go into free agency and throw money around, right? So why not leverage those 2 years,
Mhm.
extend a Pablo Lopez if you trade for him, and now you've got a pitcher locked up for a while, and you didn't have to spend big in free agency. But to kind of circle back to the initial question, Pablo Lopez is very solid, and I think you see people like, oh, is this guy that good because of how much we've heard about him? We've heard about him so much because you rarely see a pitcher like Pablo Lopez put on the market. He's a great clubhouse guy. He is steady. He is, controllable, and seems to just continue to make little tweaks and get better here and there. So you don't see those guys hit the market very often. So I think that's why it might feel like he's talked about as if he's an ace, and he's not. But this is still a really solid middle of the rotation starter that can put a team over the top.
I'm really talking myself into it. I really am. I like the idea of having him, and I know I was off on Mania last year, and he ended up being a bit of a disaster. But I just I like where Lopez has done so far. I like kind of poaching guys from teams that have struggled. Maybe this is a Musgrove thing, and I'm just like, oh my god, that works so great for us. Let's try it again. But and don't get me wrong. Obviously, some Padres fans might be thinking right now, like, oh, but I don't want to give up Grisham and Ha-Seong Kim and whatnot. It's like, well, unfortunately, you have to actually give up players, which is
Yes.
a thing that I've realized following baseball is you actually have to give up good players, unless, of course, you somehow manage the fleece of the decade on the aforementioned Pirates and whatnot. And you can't just give up Josh Mears and Ryan Weathers and say, all right, we want Sandy, we want Luzardo, this is what we want.
Yeah.
I am curious though for the rest of those guys. Sandy Alcantara, he's off the table, I imagine.
Yeah.
Not
No
happening.
shot.
I
Mm-mm.
mean, he was a Superman, and he's on one of the most team friendly kind of deals that I can think of for a starting
Yeah,
pitcher.
and beyond that,
So,
he is the franchise. Like, he goes
yeah.
to every community event. He is
Oh, I like that.
phenomenal dude. Like, he's more important beyond what we even see on the field. That's something I can speak to,
Mhm.
sure.
That's awesome. But there's still a lot of interesting guys. Jesus Luzardo, former kind of top pro prospect. He comes in, everyone's drafting him in fantasy baseball. Then he kind of flames out in 2021. It doesn't really work. And then I think it was 2021. And then the Marlins trade for him. And while he was healthy, pretty effective starter. And
Yeah,
then
he
you've
was
also
nasty.
got um, who's the other one? And then you've got Trevor Rogers, who I'm worried about. And I messaged you. I'm worried that this is your guys' Chris Paddock. Just this guy who came in rookie year with this one pitch. In the case of Rogers, it was a fastball. In case of Paddock, it was his changeup that just nobody could hit. But then maybe people adjusted to. But I want to talk about those guys. I want to talk about not Sandy because he's not getting traded, but Trevor Rogers and Jesus Luzardo. Are those also guys that you could see the Marlins trading potentially?
Rogers, yes. Luzardo, it would have to be something pretty remarkable. So I don't think Luzardo would be on the table here. Rogers would, but I look at it from a Padres perspective, and Rogers with more control, because he has, I believe 4 years of control. That's a guy that's going to cost more, even with the struggles last year, right? He was phenomenal his rookie season, runner up to Jonathan India, and then struggled last year. But a big lefty with 4 years of control is going to be extremely expensive. So, if you're a team, and there's other teams like the Red Sox and others that prefer Trevor Rogers over Lopez because they're looking at the big picture, right? They're not going to give up major pieces unless they're getting several years of control. But also, it's a mixed bag, right? We're talking about, we don't know how Trevor Rogers is going to look next year. We don't know if he's going to regain that rookie form. I can tell you Pablo Lopez what he's going to be next year. It's going to be between a 3.5 and a 3.7 ERA. He's going to strike out around a batter per 9. He's not going to walk guys, and he's going to give you a ton of quality starts. I can guarantee that. So, for the Padres, Trevor Rogers might be on the table, and he could end up being better than what you might get from Pablo, but he could also be much worse, and you're going to have to give up more to get him. So for me, I think in this case with the Padres, Lopez seems to make the most sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like kind of you pick your destination, right? It's either Trevor Rogers with the control, but there's the potential that he's just another Paddock or Manaea for us, or Mike Clevenger. And then for
Very
Pablo,
possible.
it's like solid pitcher, but maybe doesn't have the same level of upside that I think people have been excited for with Rogers, and a little bit less team control. So do you want to like try a buy low attempt? This is what I love talking about with baseball. Like, which direction do you go? Do you go for a buy low on Trevor Rogers, or maybe even maybe is it kind of buying high on Pablo Lopez? I can't really tell. He's just weird. I can't get that struggles that he had last season out of my head. I just can't.
I would say the deadline would have been buying high. I think that the Marlins fumbled a little bit there, and hindsight's 2020 because he struggled, after that deadline. But when you lose control, because it was 2.5 years of control, or I guess 2.25 at that point. And also he has those struggles. I don't know if he's being valued the same way. The second a guy gets to 2 years of control, it kind of dips off, right? And that's why, again, circling back to the Pirates situation, that guy in the outfield there has 3. And I think they're going to be pressed to trade him because once there's a big difference in these teams' minds from what I've gathered from 3 versus 2 years of control. There just seems to be this massive, and I think it's because of what you can leverage in a pre-arb deal negotiations wise, and also gives you another year to sort stuff out. And if you do want to move him, you still have 2 years of control to move him. So I think that it's probably a good time to buy on Pablo in terms of the value. And the Marlins know too that they got to make a deal probably before the season starts, because then it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. So, I think this is the time to make the deal, because if the Padres don't do it, I think somebody else is going to finally step up and put the package together.
I like that. As I was texting on my phone very rudely while you're finishing up there. But no, I really do think it seems like this is the deal. It's Grisham, Ha-Seong Kim, some random dude, maybe throw in a player to be named later or whatever the heck. That kind of seems like what we're looking at here. It doesn't seem like this is a prospect trade, which honestly I think is kind of good. I kind of want to like give the farm system a second to heal, just to recover. It took a nuclear bomb to the face, and now it's just trying to regenerate like Wolverine. Like it's trying. It's coming back slowly, but I will say, it does eventually come back. I'm all into it. I think that this would be a lot of fun. I think it makes sense for the Pods. I don't think that they need. I don't think they're on DEFCON 4. I don't think this is like what they were in 2021 when they were starting Arrieta and Velasquez, but there's definitely a lot of snares, as you outlined, as we outlined throughout the podcast, where they could get to somewhere close to that. Their offense could carry them. It's possible, but yeah, I would like just having this dude that everything that you said about Lopez, just really solid, really consistent. Might even flirt with a no hitter or two every now and then, which is kind of nice. I love that stuff. Um, but I don't know, man. I don't know. I think the big thing is going to be, do teams view Trent Grisham highly enough that they think, okay, maybe this guy isn't a below 200 hitter, right? That this isn't just Jackie Bradley Jr. in a different, uniform.
Yeah, I think for the Marlins, it's really about Kim
Mm-hmm.
and Ha-Seong Kim, And I think the trade of Rojas really does make
Yeah,
him that much more
we didn't
important. Right
talk
now, they're
about that. Yeah.
slated to start Joey Wendell at short, and Joey Wendell can play a good short, but we've never seen him do it for a whole season, right? He's great when you plug him there. It's another thing to do it all year long.
Mm-hmm.
To have a Ha-Seong Kim there would be night and day for the Marlins. And then Grisham's almost icing on the cake for me. It's just knowing that you have somebody that can play a great defense out there in
Mm-hmm.
center, and then if he hits, it's a bonus. But at least you upgraded your offense from Rojas to Kim at shortstop, which is pretty drastic given what Rojas did last year and what I think Kim can do. The last thing I'll say on the Padres is, again, Machado, this might be the only shot you have with Machado, Bogarts, and Juan Soto together here, right? And this is what you gave up the whole farm system for. If you have an opportunity here to put your team over the top, which I think is getting a starting pitcher here, it's World Series or bust this year for the Padres. And look, I know the odds are stacked against you. There's a lot of teams. The Mets are World Series or bust. The Yankees are World Series or bust. And it's a compliment to the Padres that they are World Series or bust, because that's the team that Preller has put together here. But guess what? You gotta go. We put all the chips forward here. And if Ha-Seong Kim and Trent Grisham can make you better by moving them, I think you got to do it. So I'm interested to see what they do. I won't blame them for not doing it, because at the end of the day, you want lineup depth too. But I mean, if you have a chance here to round out that rotation with another good arm, I think this could be that move that puts the Padres right up there with anybody. Not that they aren't already, but that could really solidify them at the top.
Yeah, I agree. And Preller has shown no fear whatsoever, this man, to making a trade. Does it always turn out well? Nope. But like you said, with the going all in, they basically tried to go all in last year. And I say that because, not just because of Soto, but you also grabbed Bell and Drury. And I imagine they really would have liked that they also had Tatis there. Obviously, they still had a great postseason. I'm still drinking the Dodgers tears. It's been months, Arm, and I'm still refurbished. It's great. It's fantastic. They're still upset. They're like, oh well, you guys still only what? It's incredible how funny Dodgers fans are. That the thing they're known for is blowing it in the postseason. Anyway, Peyton Manning ass franchise. So anyway, Arm, do you have any last final things you'd like to tell the good folks over of the Friar Faithful Army? And any other things you want to plug from just baseball or yourself or whatever?
No, that's just the usual. We'll be talking about all this stuff on the Just Baseball show, of course, and keep up with justbaseball.com. You put out an awesome article on some of the best moments of the year in 2022, so check that out. And if you're interested in any prospect stuff, check out the call up. We'll be breaking down every single farm system, even the Padres and what's left of it. I had a conversation with Jackson Merrill, a couple months back too. That episode is up as well. And so yeah, if you're interested in prospects, check that out.
Awesome. Sounds good, man. Everybody go check out Aram. And once again, thank you for listening to today's show, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember, subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your pods from. Me on Twitter at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, at LO_Padres on Twitter if you want some memes and stuff about the pods. And also at Aram Leighton 8 on Twitter if you want to follow Aram, who after years finally changed his Twitter icon, which I have to admit was the most exciting thing that you've done on Twitter in a long time. It's just one of my random things that if someone has an icon for too long, like you got to spice it up a little bit.
Just really bothers you, huh?
Don't be Milwaukee Brewers and just do the same thing every year without any hopes of changing. You got to change it up every now and then. You know what I mean? But yeah, everybody go check that out. Until next time, stay safe and of course, stay faithful. My Friar Faithful homies. Take care.